YouTube, what is good? Yo, I am so excited about what's in this box. All the pre-orders of the book are finally here. I'm about to start shipping them out. Feels good. So I don't know about you, but for me, color is one of my favorite aspects of life as well as visual art. It doesn't matter if it's photography, paintings, videography, really doesn't matter. Well done color sets the scene, emotion, the vibe, everything for me. Now, color is one of these things that's super difficult for me to give you information about as a YouTuber because color is subjective. What you define as the best color in your photos is completely different as what I define as my best color. So my goal of this video today is to give you all the information and insight you need to achieve whatever you define as the best color in your photography. And we're gonna talk about things that come into play when you're actually out shooting, making the photos, as well as things that come into play when you get home, you load the photos in the computer and you start editing them. So I'm about to head out to meet up with Chris. We both have about 2 hours to shoot today, which is a lot longer than normal. And along the way, I'm gonna talk about a few things that you can look out for when you're actually out in the field shooting. Before we get into that though, while I'm on my way to meet up with Chris, I wanna thank the sponsor on today's video, Squarespace. Squarespace is hooking the viewers up today. Go to squarespace.com/EvanRanft to start a free trial and use code EvanRanft to get 10% off your first purchase. Now, speaking of this book release, Squarespace was a critical part of this release. Releasing this book independently, it's not something that's necessarily easy to do, but Squarespace made it easy to get the book out there and available for everyone who is interested in one. The site was so easy to update, just added the photos in there. The template that I was using had pre-existing products, so all I had to do was shift them around, and Squarespace allows me to integrate with shipping software, which makes it very easy to send out product. Squarespace isn't only a business tool for me, it's also a powerful photography tool that I use. All these customizable templates, all these different grid layouts for blog posts allow you to showcase your work in a variety of different ways, and it's so easy to change out these posts and edit them. So you can start taking advantage of everything Squarespace has to offer today. Head over to squarespace.com/EvanRanft to start your free trial and use code EvanRanft to get 10% off your first purchase. Thank you, Squarespace. Let's get back to the vlog. So the first step when it comes to anything related to color is actually getting interesting colors in front of your camera. And downtown is hopping today. There's people everywhere. So we're gonna go back there and shoot later. It's probably not gonna be included in the video, but right now we're gonna go to a location that I've been to really only once in the past. I go there all the time, but I've only photographed it once. Super colorful. It's gonna get us some good results today. But the first thing you gotta know is put interesting colors in front of your camera if you want interesting color images. So the second thing is choosing the right type of light. And it doesn't really matter what light you're shooting in, but it kind of does matter if you're expecting a certain result. Me, I love days like this where it's overcast, the light is very flat because it kind of flattens out your colors and it makes them pop a little bit more because the light isn't being super dynamic. You're not getting a lot of shadows or a lot of highlights, so the color can really shine through. To be clear though, a sunny day or a golden hour or a lot of light isn't a bad thing for the colors in your photo. It can just change them, and it's a matter of personal preference. If you're shooting a golden hour, that can add a lot of warm light and a warm feel to the colors in an image. If you're shooting in midday, your sky can be very blue, and it can be an element of your photo that you can use to your advantage if that's something you like. And if you don't like it, probably avoid those lighting conditions. So a lot of people get confused about picture profiles. They wonder what picture profile should I shoot in, what works best. Picture profiles only really matter if you're shooting in JPEG because that picture profile is applied to the photo that you're making. If you're shooting RAW, it really doesn't matter that much because that picture profile goes away. So your preference is whatever you think looks good through your camera or your EVF, if you can even see it, or what you want to see on the back of the screen. Just remember, in RAW, it's not gonna matter. So something even more important than your picture profile is dialing in your white balance. A huge mistake people make with color is shooting a set of photos or multiple images at auto white balance. You see, auto is fine if you're shooting all day and you're just letting your camera handle it, but let's say I make a photo against this wall and then I turn to make a photo against this wall and then I turn this way. All of these have so many different colors that the camera might select a varying white balance for each photo. Like I said, this isn't really a big deal unless you're gonna post all these images together, and then you're gonna get this inconsistency in your colors. So dialing in your white balance, usually using Kelvin mode or picking like shade or sunlight, whatever you wanna do. Just keeping that white balance consistent throughout your images will give you much more consistent color. So just finished up shooting with Chris downtown for about an hour. It was a lot less colorful down there, but I did get some pretty decent stuff. If you want to see what I ended up making, it will eventually be on my Instagram at Ranft. That's so annoying. I'll see you, bro. When I announced that I was making this video on Twitter, I had someone ask me if I choose the types of cameras I use because of the color science in the cameras, and I really don't think that matters at all. Cameras, it's so nuanced. There's so many reasons to use a certain type of camera, maybe for the video aspect, maybe for the photo aspect, maybe because it feels good in your hands, you like the way it looks. All these different things come together to make you decide to use a certain type of equipment or not. So for me, I think color is like one of the last things on that list. You know, every camera is pretty good and you can get the job done. You know, I don't shoot ever on Sony, and when I went on that Sony condo trip, I had no issue making the colors work with that camera. So I wouldn't say pick a camera just based on the colors themselves. It's not that big of a deal. Maybe if you're shooting JPEG over RAW, it's more of a big deal because then the picture profiles you're using and the color science is just put right into the photo, but that's a small amount of people who shoot a lot of JPEG. Back at the office for the less fun part of my day. Got to answer some emails, got to do some work on the website because a lot of cool stuff is hopefully going to be added there within the next 2 weeks. But something that didn't really come up when we were out shooting today is this idea of color design when you're actually out in the field, manually setting up the colors in your scene and the colors in your photo. Now, this can get really complicated, and I don't want this video to be one that's confusing, so I'm going to keep it super basic. Let's take this wall right here as an example. This is a burnt orange brick wall. Now, if we were doing portraits here, I'd probably tell my subject, hey, wear some denim, wear something blue, maybe some navy, maybe some sky blue, just a blue that will pop against this orange wall. Why? Because blue is a complementary color to orange. Complementary colors are great in giving you a nice readable image. So let's say this was a street photo, I'm set up waiting for someone to cross in front of this wall. I'd probably look for these same things. Someone wearing all blue, someone wearing a blue tracksuit, maybe someone with a blue umbrella, just some blue so the subject pops out against this orange wall. And this can apply to various color combinations that I probably have on the screen right now. Honestly, color theory can be its own trade and its own craft in itself. You have photography over here, and you could have color theory be its own completely different thing. You can really learn a lot about it, and I definitely recommend doing a little bit more research on your own. But my golden rule for color theory, the main thing I look for is any outliers, any colors that don't make sense with what's going on in the shoot. So if we have all pastel colors, it makes no sense to photograph that product or that person on very vibrant, rich colors. It makes sense to photograph them on pastel colors, whether that's complementary pastel colors or analogous pastel colors, doesn't really matter. You just want to keep that palette consistent throughout and have no outliers inside of it. So it is now the next day, and now I want to go through a few things in the computer that you can do to get the best colors in your image possible. Now, once again, just like yesterday, this is subjective. It's up to you how you define the best color, but these are some things that I find especially helpful that I use in almost every single photo that I make, especially ones that are very color oriented. So let's jump into it. We're using Adobe Lightroom and Adobe Photoshop today. I don't want to waste any more time talking because this video is already pretty long. So let's get to it. The first thing we got to talk about is how vibrance is different than saturation. Vibrance is a smart tool. Notice how when you bring your vibrance all the way to 0, there's still some color left in your image. That's because Adobe is deciding what it thinks needs to have color and what doesn't. Notice if we take the saturation always all the way down to 0, there's no color. It's a black and white image. So vibrance and saturation can actually work together. So you can raise up your vibrance, things like your highlights and certain parts of the photo won't be affected, and then you can bring your shadows shadows, or excuse me, your saturation up behind the vibrance to give your photo a general bump in color. It's important to know the difference between those two. Now, the second thing we got to talk about is these HSL sliders. You have these in Photoshop as well as Lightroom. Notice the biggest mistake I see people make is they do too large of an adjustment to a single color saturation. So that blue is too low. Now we have this very odd looking like gap of color up here, and now we got to adjust our magentas and our purples to try to make up for it, and it just looks sloppy and nasty. So if you're going for a desaturated look, there's actually a much easier way to do this without going into each color channel and getting all crazy and getting these weird gaps that don't look right. What you're going to do, you make a more subtle adjustment to the main color you want to get rid of. In this case, it's the blue. We don't want as much blue. We make an adjustment also to these magentas, and we try to match the hue a little closer to blue, so the blend is a little bit better. We're going to bring that to the left. Now, we're going to desaturate everything to get that desaturated look, bring the saturation down quite a bit, but what I'm going to do is bump up our oranges now to really push out those clouds. So I made a little bit smarter of an adjustment here, and I brought up the colors that need to be brought up and brought down the colors that didn't. So let's say we have an example like this where we want to raise up our reds, but if we raise our reds, everything gets affected in the photo, not just the Porsche that we want to make pop. So we can go into Photoshop, we can add a hue saturation layer, bring up the reds right here just like this, and notice once again it affects the curtains on the top as well as the Porsche. We can go into our layers, we can get our paintbrush, change it to black, and then we can go paint over this photo as a mask. So anything we paint over with black will no longer have this color adjustment, so we can get rid of this hue adjustment in those curtains, so only our Porsche is affected by this red boost. So I briefly mentioned color design when you're out shooting. You can also utilize these complementary colors to get an image that pops more when you're editing a photo. So you can go into Google, search complementary colors, and get a good idea of what type of complementary color combinations there are out there. There's a million different examples of colors that work together. So what we're going to do is we're going to jump into Lightroom, and I'm going to show you how we can apply these different color theories to actual images that you're making via split toning. So for this first example of split tone, it's from a carnival. We're going to utilize this purple to orange split tone. Now this is in line with the complementary colors that we just saw on Google. Orange and purple go together, yellowish and purple go together. That's like the Lakers colors, depending on what hue of these colors you work with together. So what we're doing here is you see how there's so much warmth in the carnival equipment, even before the split tone, the stuff like the red lights, the yellow lights on the Ferris wheel, all this stuff. We're going to enhance that with a warm split tone in the shadow. That's why I applied that orange, and that's why the balance is set more towards the left. And then we're just going to add in this purple to the highlights to enhance the color that was already there. This next example is more of an example of using a split tone to create a complementary color set inside of our image as opposed to in the actual split tone. Notice how the color combination we have in the split tone doesn't fit into this complementary color combination, this kind of greenish orange beige thing. But what's going on here is I'm taking this blue color right here and I'm really trying to make it pop in the image. So I'm bringing the highlights up with this green color to blend with that purple color that was already there, so we can get this nice orange in the sky. And then what I'm doing is I'm taking these shadows and I'm also going to apply this orange effect to try to really balance out the entire image. What this is doing is it's making this greenish teal color in the window really pop. And then when we go back to our complementary color list, you're going to see that these colors do work well together, this orange and teal color combination right there. You see what I'm talking about? So with this split tone, we created a combo that worked. Now this one right here is kind of a similar example of that. Notice this split tone. We have this blue and this reddish color. It's not exactly blue and orange, but if we go to another example, you're going to see right down here, blue and red obviously work well together when they're in this kind of bright, almost Miami Vice-like tone. And that was what I was going for with this image. So we already have this kind of reddish light coming into our frame. So I know I want to do something with blue. That's why I go with blue in the shadows. And then our highlight is mainly on this right side of the image. You can see it's popping right on our subject. That is why I added in this red split tone into the highlight. These colors obviously work well together. And this highlight adjustment really just pumps up that highlight that was already red and already there and creates nice complementary colors with that blue. And there we go. That is everything that I wanted to talk about today. That's my process when I go out to shoot, and then when I get home to edit, that's how I create the colors I create in my image. Now, here's a really important thing I want you to remember with this video. This is not fact. I'm not telling you this is how you have to do something. I'm just showing you all the information I have about how I do something, because I get a lot of questions about this. You can pretty much do whatever you want. Color is one of those things where, like I've said a million times in the video, it's subjective. It's based on perception. It's based on how you as an artist feel about colors that you're presenting to a viewer. It's about how a viewer feels about certain colors, and the way one person feels about a color palette could be completely different to how I feel about it. So don't overstress everything I talked about in the video. I want you to just take whatever I've done, maybe apply it to what you've done, and slowly start figuring out your own process. And hopefully you can achieve the types of colors you want in your image based on all the information I gave you. This is a really weird video because it's not factual. It's all based on what you like. But to finish this thing off, I did get a few questions on Twitter about this subject, about color, so I want to go through them really quick. There's 3 of them that I want to talk about. The first question: how color and the lighting of color can affect composition. This is actually an example that I showed in the video. That photo where we have a person walking through this lit scene. It's a car creating light against this garage. It's like reddish pink. That is an example of where that light and that color made me frame up the composition the way that I did. I knew, all right, this light is hitting here. I wanted to show the drop off of the light that I saw, so I framed the light on one side of the image to allow that gradient to where it faded to darkness. That's exactly how I saw it, but the positioning of the color and the fact that it was so bold and bright is what made me want to do the photo in the first place, and then I set up the composition accordingly. So yeah, light and color can definitely affect composition depending on what you're shooting. Same thing with that example of the model with the colorful jacket. I purposely shot that from a very low angle to take advantage of that blue sky so the colors in the jacket would pop. I based that composition solely off the fact that where we were shooting, the sky was very blue, the jacket was bright, and I framed it up that way. I thought it would look good. Next one: do you believe in color theory, or do you believe that emotions associated with a specific color are all up to perception of the viewer and intention of the artist? Kind of spoke on this a minute ago. I 1000% believe this. I don't believe that red means anger and blue means soothing. That's BS to me. It's like horoscopes, but if you want to believe it, go for it. For me, I think it varies from person to person. Some people love the way Tim Burton movies are set up with their color and the way the color design is. Some people hate it. So it's all up to the person watching it and viewing it, and that's what's great about art, and that's why color is such a good element of art, because it can really attract a certain person and bring out emotions in certain types of people. And it also allows you as an artist a way to express yourself through the way you see color. So for me, I think it's about the viewer and the audience and what's in the photo more than like these secret meanings of color. So the last question, someone wanted me to touch on camera calibrations in Adobe. They said they always mess this up. They can't figure out this step of the process. Here's the thing with camera calibration in Adobe. It's at the very bottom of Lightroom. I don't always use it. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't, but here is what I do with this. And this is solely my process. This is not like some technical thing. I don't know how other people do it. I don't know how you're supposed to do it. This is how I do it. So what I've done in the past is if I have a photo where I'm saying, the colors are really off, they look weird in this based on the camera that I'm using. A good example of this is that car photo that I showed in there where the Porsche is red and then the awnings are also red. Straight out of the raw file, they were actually kind of more pink, which I didn't like. And I would show these camera calibrations, but it's kind of giving away the secret sauce, so I can't. I've given you a lot of info in this video, but I can't give you that. It's the Krabby Patty secret formula. But anyways, so what I did there is I calibrated the greens and reds to go with how I actually wanted them to look in this photo, and then I based the entire edit around those calibrations. And then those 4 photos that I showed when we were out in kind of the vlog portion of the video, all of those photos had the same camera calibration because I took it from the one photo and pasted it to the other one. So all the greens kind of start out with the same tone, all the reds kind of start out with the same tone because they are corrected. So what you can do is save these as a preset, preset and then apply them to future photos to get some continuity in your style. So for me, my process is kind of sped up because I have a group of presets that are based on edits I've already done that I've saved, and I can go back and say, oh, okay, cool, this camera calibration and this preset that I did months or years ago works with this particular photo. So every single image doesn't get a new camera calibration. That's, I don't think, the intention of that module, at least that's how I see it. I think it's more of something where you make some adjustments because you know this is how it's gonna look in your raw file, or this is how it's gonna come out of camera and you don't like that. So yeah, hopefully that answered your question. That is it for me today, y'all. Thank you so much for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, hit that thumbs up, hit that subscribe for more. Y'all are the truth. I will catch you next time.